The best way I can describe this is if the devil was designing a perfect place in hell for a car guy, it would be that he'd have you race a Camry in a Porsche 911 and always lose.
So it's hard to believe, but there is somebody who loves Burt Reynolds more than Mr. Arnie Toman. And his name is Taylor Hall. And he has organized a race which I think originally was called the Bandit Run, but that might be copywritten by a rally, which has really no semblance to the Bandit Run, kind of about the same as, the Gumball is to the Cannonball Run to Texarkana to get Coors Banquet beer, just like in the Smokey and the Bandit movie. He created it as we can't say that it's a race, but it's a race. Having done such feats as the Cannonball, I wanted to participate in this as well because it's right up my alley. Speed run, competition, chance to win, risk everything, gain nothing. Absolutely. Sounds like my type of fun. And of course, had to do it with my partner in crime, Arnie. And Arnie is the world's best Burt Reynolds fan. He's got a resto-modded Trans Am with a LS3 in it that he's constantly doing videos with Coors Light in the back. And then he also has a 77 Trans Am that his neighbor owned when he was a kid. And he recently got the opportunity to buy this Bandit Trans Am from his neighbor's estate or whatever and kind of sort of restore it. It's rusty and kind of beat up, but that's perfect because then you can drive it. So our plan was to do the Bandit Run in the Bandit Trans Am. We weren't trying to be fast. I know that's a shocker for me and Arnie, but we just wanted to do it. He was going to do his best Burt Reynolds outfit. My outfit was to be determined, but it was maybe going to be snowman, but probably not. So I'll let you all guess what the other option was. And maybe a week before the event, just the Trans Am wasn't going to get done. And Arnie had some other obligations and wasn't able to make it. Lined up a co-driver. Ed was unavailable. My wife was unwilling. So Dave Black, Ed's co-driver, volunteered happily. So essentially the two fastest co-drivers in the world got together.
So back in January of this year, I got a call from Ed Bolian to asking if I was willing to do a Bandit Run. So the two movies that I have found to be the most influential in my life, absolutely, Smokey and the Bandit, Cannonball Run. And from a movie standpoint, Smokey and the Bandit, I think, is a better movie. Cannonball had a little more influence on me, but I loved both of them for the core premises that these were long-distance trips, Cannonball especially. I mean, the fact that it's New York to LA, and then, with Bandit, it was a 28-hour run. All the other stuff, all the other parts of the story, those were nice, but I really love the idea that you're under this deadline to be able to do this really fast. So I've always been just a huge fan of all the Burt Reynolds movies. Burt Reynolds is my spirit animal. So I get this call from Ed to do this. It was with Doug Tabbitt, who's Arnie Toman's co-driver, and I thought this is going to be really cool because here you have the two fastest co-drivers in the country doing this run together, and it just sounded like a blast to be able to have us kind of get out there and do our thing.
Originally, we set out just to have fun, but in true Cannonballer form, we can never just have fun. We have to try to win.
I met up with the guys down at the Varsity restaurant in Atlanta, and afterwards, Doug and I drove up to where he was staying, and I saw the car, and it was this really lovely 911. I would call this color the ambiguously gray duo. It, one angle, it looked like one color gray. From the other, it looked slightly different. So it was fantastic. And it was really exciting. I love the 911. I think they're absolutely wonderful cars. I mean, it's 60 years of refinement built into these, and they're just always wonderful.
We had kind of a non-ideal departure time. The slot started at midnight. We took the last slot, which was at 5:15 a.m. So we really didn't get much nighttime driving, but figured what the heck. We're just going to get beer, going for a leisurely drive. Doesn't really matter. Everyone else can compete.
So your departure time on a Bandit Run is a little different than a Cannonball, where in a Cannonball, you're sort of trying to structure it in a way that you don't hit LA traffic at a certain time and what have you. But with a Bandit Run, there's a funny constraint. Alcohol is not allowed to be sold in Texas until 7 a.m. So you need to figure out kind of what your time is going to be to reach Texarkana at 7 a.m. if you want to maximize your time in the dark. And so go ahead and we punch our time and we take off. And Waze just completely fails us because there's one way that you can get out of this place that puts you straight up onto the freeway. Waze, for some reason or another, I just assumed they thought we were coming out of concert traffic and directed us through all these little side streets and then put us up on the freeway. And then we finally made our way out. It probably cost a couple minutes, but that is what it is. We just worked with it. And we got ourselves out on I-20 and just started cooking our way towards across the country.
Dave turned out to be a fantastic co-driver. I can see why Ed chose him. He was excellent on the binoculars. We spent a good portion of the drive making fun of Ed's non-stabilized, bought at the last minute Walmart binoculars that did him probably no good.
We had a really good rhythm. We were working really well together. It was, the way I would describe it and the way that he and I drove is two very on the spectrum people approaching a 13-hour video game. I mean, we were both, he was driving, I'm sitting there calling, we're switching, he's calling, I'm driving, no other chatter, nothing. There might have been a little bit of discussion about Ed's use of binoculars and that maybe, but I will say that these binoculars were absolutely the most amazing thing that you could ever use for this type of thing. They're gyrostabilized. They have this really incredible long distance view. And what that does is it compresses all of the visuals so that what's coming towards you looks like it's standing still. You can literally sit there and look at each single car and just study it.
So we quickly got into a rhythm and got up to speed and got our average up to 90 and then 100 and then I think about 106.
We're making really good time across I-20. I think we've hit an average of close to 106 at this point. Sun's come up. We've got, traffic. We're starting to deal with I-20. We're really trying to work our way across the country at this point. And as soon as we get to Shreveport, I'm looking at the clock and I'm just stunned because I've made this trip from Atlanta to Dallas so many times and Shreveport is at the end of a long day, but we're there and it's noon. So at this point, we have to then hook up 49 and go up to Texarkana. And as we're getting on, we find ourselves right behind a cop in an SUV.
It was frustrating because it was the fastest section of the whole drive and we couldn't pass him. Thankfully, though, he was going at about 100 miles an hour. So we just tucked in, maybe half a mile behind him, enough to see him, but not enough that we'd draw attention to ourselves for pacing him, and just cruised with him for a while.
So let me tell you about how Cannonball gas stops work. You land at your pump, co-driver jumps out, puts the card in, pulls the pump, sticks it in, and as soon as you stick that pump in, you get that gas flowing, you run in, you go to the bathroom, you come back out, you tend to the pump, and as soon as you're done, you pull it, driver hops out, you get in, you switch, you go. You're maximizing every single second at a gas stop when you do this. In this case, we had to buy beer.
So we rolled into the gas station with 102 average and ran in and I grabbed the Coors and one of the other teams had bought out all of the Coors Banquet beer. So we had to settle for Coors Light. I know, we should be disqualified. And slapped a 20 down on the thing and asked the girl, how many people have come to get beer so far today? She's like, yeah, a lot of them. And they were all in a hurry. I'm like, great, keep the change, bye. And ran back out to the car and it was done fueling. And then Dave had to go to the bathroom.
So I run in and I stand in front of the toilet and I start to go. And as I'm going, it was like the hands of the gastrointestinal gods came down and just twisted my lower intestines. And I'm like, oh no. Not even wanting to risk anything at this point, I immediately switch over to the stall. With as much force as a pregnant woman giving birth to a 12-pound baby, I've never gone to the bathroom this fast in my life and got myself back out there. And as soon as I did, Doug was like, man, that took you kind of a while. And I was like, yeah, you have no idea what I had to do.
But anyway, we jumped back in the car and made our way back down the highway. Thankfully, the Louisiana highway patrolman had turned around and found somewhere else to go. So we were able to really crank on the way back south and then promptly ran into Saturday traffic.
It was much more work even than when Ed and I set the Cannonball record. We had a lot of traffic, during the daytime during the Cannonball. But in this case, it was just even that much worse. And some of these states like Mississippi, Louisiana, the drivers, there's not really an awareness for staying in the right lane, or it's just kind of all over the place. A lot of slow drivers. It just gets congested. It's really tough.
We made our way through the traffic as best we could because we were starting to get really competitive. Everybody else was finishing or was close to finishing and posting their averages, and so we kind of knew where we were at. The problem with doing cannonballs is you always get caught, especially if you're in kind of a flashy car, with people trying to street race you, especially Mustangs. And that's incredibly dangerous. There was this black and yellow Mustang that was trying to race us for the longest time, and we finally got away from him, and then we had to stop for gas, and then we caught back up to him, so we had to get away from him again. But before we could even do that, there was this silver Toyota Camry with the bumper like half falling off, and the guy just kind of texting and all that.
This was a big concern that a lot of people, are seen as kind of passing by, and these other people are being ridiculous in the way they're driving. We're keeping it smooth. We're not doing really hard passes on people, working our way through, but these guys are just chasing us, and they're in these the Mustang was this ridiculous color.
So we finally got ahead of them, and this Camry would not get off our tail. Every move we made, he would follow us. And we even, I'm ashamed to admit it, but we made a few aggressive moves, we'll say, just to try to get away from this guy, because it's one thing to drive aggressively with somewhat professional drivers in a very capable car like a Porsche, where you know exactly what the car can do. It's a whole nother thing to do it with somebody else who really doesn't care and doesn't have the proper equipment, who's trying to keep up with you.
The best way I can describe this is if the devil was designing a perfect place in hell for a car guy, it would be that he'd have you race a Camry in a Porsche 911 and always lose.
And finally lost him, but this probably took about an hour to get ahead of this Camry. But that was probably the most eventful part of it. We didn't see a whole lot of cops other than the couple we were stuck behind. There were a couple decent speed traps, but the other guys on the run had run so well that they hadn't really stirred up the hornet's nest for us.
It starts to get into the later afternoon, and there's this point on I-20 that I love. I mean, I've made this trip from my family's home in Texas all the time, and nothing is more satisfying than when you crest the hill. It's around Lithia Springs, and you just sort of crest and you look down, and there's the skyline of Atlanta. And that was the most amazing sight this time, to crest that and know that we were almost home. I was looking at Waze and looking at its directions, and man, it was about to do this stuff to us again. It was going to send us through people's, living rooms to get us back to where we were going. But I knew that the actual route is to actually hit 75, and there's actually an exit for the amphitheater fairgrounds, and we were able to, I had to override Waze in my navigation at this point, and we kind of flipped up over, looped ourselves in, landed at the parking lot, hit the time, and hopped out with our beer and took our pictures and sent it to the group. We didn't believe we had actually won or did anything well, because there was another team that was actually looking like they had had a really amazing time.
And there was a number of teams this run who were very capable and very fast, who were sub 15 hours as well. But the one team that we thought had beat us handily because of the updates they had posted forgot that there was a time change between Georgia and Texas in their calculations. So they posted an hour faster than they actually were. So we had no idea that we won this thing. We thought we were just coming in for second, maybe third place. And we posted our time to the group, and everyone goes, "Congrats, you did it again," all that. We're like, what are you talking about? And then Fred Ashmore, who was a previous winner and record holder, texted us and said, yeah, the time to beat's 14:05. I'm like, what? And I looked at Dave. I'm like, Dave, I think we won.
This was a really fun race. It didn't have the big gravitas of a cannonball or setting a cannonball record, which is kind of a lifelong dream. But I think the homage to the movie that I loved, to the whole idea, this crazy idea of just running to Texarkana for a 6-pack of beer and back, really made this just kind of whimsical and fun.
So we popped open a Coors and celebrated in the cold parking lot with ourselves and one other team that had just come in as well. And it was a cold, lonely celebration like most Cannonball type events.
So from a record standpoint, I think it's pretty cool. But, from an adventure standpoint, it's right up there with everything I love to do.